Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the first episode of the fourth season for Roger's Realtime Talkshow event. I am Roger Hanson, your host, here with my co-host Mark Edworthy, my brother Robert Hanson, and Otto X. Welcome to the show, guys. Now, this season is going to be different. The first season we did political history for the United States. The second season we did political history concerning the UK. And the third season we did the political history for Europe. This year we are going to do something different because me and Mark Edworthy both got into a conversation and we decided, that it was pretty hectic during Europe, and if we went on to do something like from Asia or the Middle East or even Russia, it would be even worse. It would be horrible to try to do that. So we
Asia as a continent and Middle East as area is too confusing. Yeah, it would be hard to confuse.
Well, in the Middle East, what is that? What they call the Middle East is really the Near East or the Levant. You've got the Far East, which is, obviously Japan, China, Mandalay, on the road to Mandalay, where the flying fish is from. And the sun comes up like thunder out of China across the bay. And
this season, we decided that we were going to go a different direction. We both easily decided that it would be just too overwhelming, and it would really be really confusing. Just did way too much. So this year we are going to be moving in a different direction. We will be discussing socialism and also sociology, and we will also be discussing atheism and how it relates to these subjects. We will also be discussing subjects concerning the Frankfurt School, which is actually a big part of the discussion that we will be having this year, and that is basically the direction that we will be taking. So with that being said, we will start out with socialism and sociology. Tonight's question: when people say that's socialism, what do they actually mean? Are sociology and socialism the same thing? Or has the line between academic study and political ideology become blurred over time? Let's find out. Now, for me, what I have a problem with about this is when I talk to people, most of the time they try to say that these two things, socialism and sociology, are two separate and distinct things. And I have done a lot of research in the last year or so, year and a half, when it comes to linguistics. And I can tell you one thing that I have learned. I've learned that people have become very good at changing names when it comes to certain things. And when I hear people say that sociology isn't socialism and socialism isn't sociology, that is something that really sticks out to me. I can point out times in history when names have been changed. Like at one time there was Romanticism, and there was idealism or being an idealist, and that ended up changing to new words like ideologies and then socialism and so forth. And for me, it seems that as time went forward, a lot of these words changed names. They became a different word, but the same thing. You know what I mean? Or maybe it evolved or something of that nature. But they did change in the names they were being called. So, and it just seems to me that people who are involved with sociology and believe in it and are actively a part of it, they want to push this idea that sociology is not the same as the socialism or anything of that nature. So with that being said, I want to open it up, but before we get started with Mark, Edworthy, or Robert, I want to start everything off with Otto first because we have got to keep him energetic.
Yeah, I'll be leaving early today, I think. But
so, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a far stretch to say that the majority of sociologists today are probably socialists. However, not all socialists are sociologists. As I understand it, sociology has to do with the study of society as such, whereas socialism has to do with a specific way to organize that society. And it revolves around state control of industry, state control of commerce, state control of every aspect of your life, ultimately. I remembered something a left-wing politician in this country said that his goal was to have a very large government that was involved in every decision you made in your life, and that a lot of people would be okay with that. And I'm sure a lot of them would. But on the other hand, sociology has been used as a tool of late by people who definitely have socialistic leanings. Sociology can be used as a tool because, oh, look, it's science. Well, I know some physicists that might disagree. Sociology is very much a soft science. Its results are not only always replicable, there are so many different factors to take into account. And especially lately, they've been finding that a lot of these sociology papers have had to be withdrawn because they either cherry pick their data or make stuff up, or their results are simply not replicable. And so, yeah, I think that in modern day academia, I'm not going to go on about Plato, the academy, but it does. Socialism, fascism, all of these collectivisms all ultimately do stem to the ideas of Plato, the idea of unity being the highest good, and the people must be unified by any means necessary. It's basically a collectivist kind of an outlook, and that's very much being pushed, and sociology is a great tool for that. Karl Marx is studied seriously by sociologists, despite the fact that Marxism as an ideology is pretty much demonstrably a fraud. But at the same time, Marx does give us some interesting tools to use to analyze things. I mean, you can use economic relationships to analyze what's happening in a society, but it is not the only it's not the only criteria you should use. It limits you, and it makes you have basically you're using a very limited view. It's like you're looking at the world through like a little dot in a piece of cardboard you're holding in front of your face. It might direct you to something, but you're going to be tripping over a lot of stuff and bumping into things and falling off of cliffs and possibly getting yourself killed in the meantime. So sociology can be a way to say, oh no, it's all well proven and this and that. So yeah, I think any relationship between sociology and socialism is a recent one, and I think one is very likely being used as a tool to promote the other one. How's that?
I guess the best way for me to, what you said sounded good, but I guess the best way for me to say it is it goes back to what I originally asked in this question. When people say that that's socialism, what do they actually mean? Are sociology and socialism the same thing, basically? Now, I do know, like Marxism, there are Marxists and socialists who are into sociology, and at the same time, there actually is sociology in conservatism as well. So I do know that.
Well, yeah, you can have a conservative sociology, I think. Well, somebody pointed out a lot of what we've got going on now. One of the big things about socialism is ruled by technocrats, an elite that know better than us. I think that there's this idea with socialists that the world will be run by college professors, and all these college professors that push it think they're going to be the ones running the world. These theoreticians. So yeah, this is something else that would push that socialistic agenda. I mean, it's a great idea if you're like an academic and like, you're going to rule the world, buddy. Once we just get everybody on board with this socialism thing, rule by the eggheads.
Okay, so with that being said, let me go ahead and hand this over to you, Mr. Edworthy. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Virtually the same as Otto's just said. Being a scientific study of human society, social interaction and social structures, but also an examination of group dynamics, cultural normalities, and but I'm also thinking on the point of sociology, since it's a study, is a force. I'm thinking of in the concept of let's say nudge units, being able to persuade people and groups into believing or doing something. May that be a religious religious group, religious orthodoxy, or a political orthodoxy. So religious, the concept of using an obvious one would be Catholicism and trying to encourage appropriation, birth, and children are not using condoms and stuff. So, but also the sort of nudge units in relation to persuading people not to, smoke, as an example. But so really, yeah, it's just not just a study in itself. It's an enforcement tactic, and this is where you could argue the point of socialism, how socialism is imparted into it, having sort of groups, may that be governmental or religious or whatever group, trying to enforce their ideas onto the population just by sort of nudging the population into believing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a tool, a propaganda tool.
Now, I do know where you're coming from when you're discussing that, because the whole deal about it is like the first definition of society sociology is, sociology is like the study of society, basically, and it asks questions like, why do people behave differently in groups, or how are social norms created, or why do institutions survive, and how are values passed from one generation to another, and things like what causes social change and things of that nature. So I do get that. I mean, it even studies families, religion, economics, crime, education, governments, even the community and culture. Sociology itself isn't like a political system. It's an attempt at like studying how societies function. But the question still remains, who gets to decide how society should function? I think that's what the most important part is that needs to be asked.
Me. I should decide. I should be the one.
Top down or the bottom up sort of argument. Yeah.
But then
do governments, do nudge units decide, or do corporations even decide how society should work or should?
Well, there's the pressure. There's pressure on the sociologists too. I remember these sociologists did a study, and the study showed that cultural diversity destabilized neighborhoods, made quality of life decline, increased crime. Just basically that diversity is our greatest weakness, and this is what his data showed. And he sat on this paper for years because he was shocked and horrified. And to be fair, some people wouldn't publish it at all. He did publish it with a lengthy apology. Mea culpa, I'm so sorry, but this is what the data say. And we can't change the. I mean, he was that honest. A lot of people have been cherry picking and stuff. One of my favorites was, and talking about social engineering and sociology, there was this big landmark study in the U.S. that showed that secondhand smoke caused an increase in likelihood of like heart disease.
Now, before we go further, I want to actually start defining socialism. Okay, so that we have that explained. Socialism is not the study of society. It's a political and economic philosophy. Its central concern is who owns the means of production. Now, in plain English, that means who owns the factories, who owns the land, who controls energy, who profits from labor. Socialists generally believe that society should have more collective control over important resources, but socialism is not one single thing. There's democratic socialists, there's Christian socialists, and there's market socialists, as well as libertarian socialists and revolutionary Marxists. And there was one thing that I did want to point out too when it comes to this. When we were doing our episodes on political history with England, I pointed out the fact that socialism was being taught in Sunday schools in England. And when I did that, it didn't seem to get any kind of effect from anybody. And it amazed me that even though I said that, nobody seemed to even care about the fact that these kids in Sunday school were being taught socialism, and that completely amazed me.
Sell all your goods and give them to the poor. What was he thinking?
Now, before we go any further, I do want to pass this on to Robert and let him say his piece, because I know he has a lot to say about this. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Robert. You need to unmute and go from there. So turn it over to you.
To me, when did all that start? When did the socialists, because for it to get as big and as popular and all that, it's like what happened in the UK with their thing of we call where you feel like a girl and you're a guy, you can get the sex change and all that. That group, okay, it's like they follow in the thing of where you got to go with the trail, because if you don't, you're going to you're against the thing of that. And if you disagree with that, well, look at the way things are. That they was wanting to put all things in that had nothing to do. They was going for any other time. It wouldn't be a big thing of all this about the process of when people feeling like men or women and all that. Government wouldn't go out and spend large amounts of money for the subject at hand. Passing these things about separate bathrooms, medical, and all that, and children that don't have to go talk to their parents about getting same sex and all that, because the government will go and do it for them, bypassing the rights of the parents, and pass the thing of what the laws are. And when all that happens,
I mean, if you want, I can kind of break that down. Hold up. No, remember we're doing. Let me respond to that.
I just wanted to point out one thing before you continue. Just to answer Robert's first question, where it all began, we did an entire in the last season we did a series on Adam Smith and Locke, doesn't we?
Yeah.
And this dates back to 17th century sort of.
It goes quite a ways. And now, see, when you start getting into this conversation, especially when it comes to transgenderism, this is something that we are going to be discussing, and we're going to be discussing this on a serious level, because this is something that is involved with what we're discussing. The thing about this is there's a lot of things that all of these people actually disagree with when it comes to what they agree with and what they disagree with on the subject. Now, I'm talking about what these people all talk about it, and they disagree about it among one another, okay? Especially when it comes to sociology. Now, this is where things get kind of confusing, and this is also where the arguments start happening. This is the point where things do get confusing and the arguments begin. Now, some branches of society, of sociology, they don't just simply ask how does society work. They ask who benefits from the way society works. Now, this shift is important. Instead of observing society, the goal becomes to critique society and eventually to change it. And the thing is, like, this actually brings us into something else that I do want to eventually get into, because what you're talking about here leads us into the Frankfurt School. This is where where the Frankfurt School enters the subject. Now, the Frankfurt School in 1923 was a group of scholars that founded the Institute of Social Research in Germany. Today we call it the Frankfurt School. And that is eventually what I do want to be getting into. But before we do that, I want to hand this over to Otto to see if there's anything that he wants to bring up as a subject that pertains to the Frankfurt School or whatever we've discussed, or even if it doesn't have anything to do with the Frankfurt School, if there's anything that he wants to make a comment on that we can respond to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Otto.
Well, I think that one of the problems we're facing is that society is going in directions that it hasn't gone in before. And we're all concerned about how this is happening. We talk about the Frankfurt School, and we talk about, the uses sociology is put to. A study of human behavior can be a means of manipulating human behavior. And I mean, you find that in advertising, you find that in every aspect of what's going on. But I think an important element to keep in mind is, I've got that old saying that, cupidity and stupidity do more than conspiracy to explain the course of history. A lot of this stuff really has its own momentum. And a lot of people are very short-sighted. They act very quickly. They don't keep the larger picture in mind. And somebody skilled at sociology, skilled at understanding mass psychology, can exploit this for their own ends. Unfortunately, I think most of their ends are rather short-sighted. That's why, there's a lot of people that think that the world is being run by a secret society of some sort. If so, they're really a bunch of blithering idiots. It seems to be more likely that there are dozens of groups that think they quote unquote run the world or are trying to. There's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be people struggling for resources. And we see very little of what's going on. There's an old saying that if you see them on TV or in the papers, then they're just propped up there for you to blame. They have very little to do with who's actually running things. And this can get us into the so-called, they call it the deep state now. Now, for decades, since I was a teenager, I looked at the situation and I said, I used to call it the third echelon guys. Not the people that are elected, not the first echelon, not the people they appoint, but the people that have been there for 30 years. The third tier guys. They're not going to tell their new boss everything because he's going to be gone in 4 years when a new president appoints him. Not going to tell the president everything. He's going to be changed in 4 years. It's none of his business. We've been running this thing for 30 years here. We don't need these elected guys coming in. So there's always, it's the old principle. If you go into an office, and we've all done this, the best person to chat up is the secretary. She knows more about what's going on than anyone else in the whole building. So it's a question of being aware of what's happening. Sorry, I kind of faded out a little bit. I'm really tired.
Oh no, you did great. Now with that, I'm going to ask if Mark Edworthy would like to make a response to the comments that Otto just made right now. Turn that over to you, Mark.
Okay, just for clarification points, when you're talking about the Frankfurt School, you're talking about the School of Thought and Sociology and Critical Theory.
Yeah. Oh no,
yeah,
and all those guys. The boogeymen of the West, the boogeymen now. I see them blamed for everything.
Not to be confused with the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, which is
those are the guys. Yep, that's them. They run the world.
He's actually another famous, university. Yeah, university. They're coming out of Frankfurt. But yeah. I was going to make a point there now. I just totally forgot what it was.
See, that's what happens when you start cross-talking. You forget where your place is and what you're going to talk about. So
we have so many ideas; they get lost in the shuffles.
Well, it was your guys' idea to do this kind of a format when it comes to chairing and stuff, and you guys were wanting to be rebels and stuff. But just to let you put it out there, this was your idea to do this. So So let me kind of fire this off
Okay.
so that we can, because I did have some thoughts about what with concerns to this whole thing about the Frankfurt School. Now, like I said a little while ago, the Frankfurt School actually started in 1923, I believe, and the deal about that was that they try to make it out like it was named the Institute for Social Research in Germany, when in reality it actually was named the Frankfurt School in Germany. But today they call it the Institute for Social Research. They didn't change that until they were forced to leave Germany because of World War II and the Nazis. And that's when they came over here to the United States and they freaking changed their names to the Institute for Social Research, which after World War II they eventually moved back to Germany and became the Frankfurt School again. But they left the institution here in our colleges and universities, and these are in every single college, pretty much every single college and institution here in the United States, and they're the ones that hand out all of these pamphlets and stuff that concern activist groups and stuff of that nature. So that's something that I did want to bring up. Another thing that I do want to also mention is, like I said, this was the Frankfurt School, the Institution for Social Research, and they had thinkers that included people like Erich Fromm. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Erich Fromm, but he was one of them. Many of these people who were involved with the Frankfurt School were deeply influenced by Karl Marx. But see, they noticed something strange. See, Marx predicted that workers would rise up against capitalism, but that didn't happen. Instead, workers started buying houses, they raised their families, they went to church, they listened to the radio or watched movies. So the Frankfurt thinkers asked, if capitalism isn't maintained only by economics, what else keeps it alive? Now, from this, their answer was culture. And from this also is where critical theory eventually emerged. Now, its basic question is, who holds power and how does institutions preserve it? So from this point on, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to hand this over to Mark Edworthy again, and hopefully he doesn't do anything that's insane or freaking get out of control or irate or anything of that nature. I hand it over to you, Mark Edworthy.
I don't think anything's too intense for Lord Edworthy. Come on.
I think it moved over to the US pre-World War II in the mid-30s.
Yeah, the Germans drove them out. They thought they were destructive to their society.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Mind you, the Nazi Party didn't come to power until then. The German Workers' Socialist Party didn't come to power until 1932. 29, 32. So yeah. This is really about how to manipulate society rather than like I said before, a bottom-up sort of concept. This is really just a sort of mechanism as a sort of power grab sort of thing, allowing getting there for echo. Allowing the government to nudge, or the authorities to nudge people into doing things, into doing and believing in certain things.
Yeah, definitely.
Carry on.
Do you have anything you want to say about Marx mentioned Otto?
Well, yeah, he's on the button there. This was an attempt to change the society through deconstructing it. One of the things that the aficionados of this idea did was pathologize, basically reclassify that which would be considered quite normal, or 99% of human history, and reclassify these things as abnormal, bad, wrong, pathological. They had this thing called the fascist test, the F scale, and you could be put on the F scale if you simply said that, well, I prefer to be with people that are like me. Oh, you're a fascist. That's proto-fascism. Things like that. I want to be, have a strong family. They saw the family as very dangerous. One of their theories was the reason you had fascism was because people grew up in a family with a strong father, and so we wanted strong leaders. And so the way to get rid of that want for strong leaders is to get rid of fathers. So if people grow up in homes, and of course, theory was, well, according to their ideas, there's no reason at all that you need both parents. Why would that matter at all? Despite the fact of our lived experience for tens of thousands of years, and the fact that we've been maintaining families for all that time, you could argue that this is something biologically written into us. But they decided, well, we're just going to do away with all that. And the idea of like trying to deconstruct society so as to deconstruct people's behaviors and their thinking. The idea that, well, this is just as good as anything else, because they're reductionists. There's no God, right? There's no reality. There's no truth. Nothing is true. All is permitted. That's the kids are still saying that today. Satori says it once in a while in his poetry, and it's a very dangerous thing, because then you can say, well, it's just as good to have like single parents and sexualizing children, and that was one theory they had. One of the reasons we have fascism is because children are sexually repressed. We have to, allow them free sexual expression. Children. This was a theory that they were doing in post-war Germany. The idea that if you raised children to have a non-traditional sexuality, they wouldn't have all of these terrible things that go along with heterosexual male dominance and so forth and so on. So, these theories were completely composed in an ivory tower, and then to inflict them on the population, or at least attempt to. And a lot of it had to do with what you would call the turning of names. Nietzsche called it the revaluation of values, where suddenly if you say something like, geez, I want my child to go to a school where only girls are allowed into the girls' restroom, well, that suddenly becomes one of the most horrible fascistic things, and you could even, some periods of time, lose your job over saying something like that. So this was what these guys were trying to do. And what's very interesting is that a lot of these guys, Adorno and all those guys, they became very important in American academia. I mean, in the academic world, if you have like a couple of top professors, their students will tend to become the top professors in other places. One or two people can have an amazing influence in academia. And of course, these professors influence all of their students. And, college is an interesting thing. I'm that most dangerous of people. I'm a guy with some college. I went to college for 5 years. I never took a degree. But I spent a lot of time in academia. I got to know a lot of professors, a lot of my fellow students. And one of the things that I noticed was that if you took the degree You had to buy into everything to get that degree. If you wanted the professor to like you, you had to agree to his politics and his social ideas. If you wanted to hang out with the other people getting that degree, you had to agree with that. And that goes right on to when you get your first job. So what do? Well, I always say people are either knaves or fools, but they'd rather be fools than knaves. So you can tell yourself, well, I don't believe any of this crap, but I got to say this. I have to be a hypocrite. I have to lie so that I don't get kicked out of the class or a low grade, so that I get the job. Or you can, instead of being a knave, because that's basically the behavior of a knave, you're lying to yourself and to other people, you become a fool, which is you can go through all these amazing mental gymnastics. Well, this is kind of like this. Yeah, I do kind of agree with that. And I certainly wouldn't want someone to be upset or offended. And, I mean, it's the same way that, like, a very, very astute theologian can, like, work his way through all these mental hoops and this and that, and then bam, at the end of the line, you've got transubstantiation as a thing. Despite the fact that you can make, Tan's not here. You can make a chemical analysis of the host. You can make a chemical analysis of the wine at any stage of the mass, and there's not going to actually be a change. So, yeah, I think that was. I'm probably ranted out at this point, but
that was good. Now, before you get started, Mark, I do want to say this is not responding to all those comments. This is actually going to be you making your own comments. So go ahead and make your statement, and that's going to be your statement of what has been discussed here, or what Otto's discussed, or what I've discussed, or anybody else. So this is actually going to be your statement, okay? So with that, I'm going to just turn it over to you.
I do want to respond.
Well, you can through a statement of your own respond to everything that's mentioned, and then we will
forgets my fault.
We will respond to you. So you go ahead and just say what's on your mind.
Thank you. You were dragging on, and I was starting to lose the train of my thoughts, and that's the danger of this sort of format. I find it interesting. Also, you were using terms like "were" when you were describing these things. I would argue that these concepts are happening now rather than were in the past tense. Yeah. But when you were talking about academia, I was just thinking of the concept that I always argue about, is the long march with institutions. You get taught by an academic to believe in certain things, and then you continue to spread that message.
Right.
You become a lecturer, or even worse, you become a human resources manager,
lowest than Dante's hell.
and then you push it into corporations, and you push it into society as a whole, and then in effect, what you say becomes the rigueur, the standard, and then anybody who disagrees with that are treated like pariahs, are treated as fools, as we see at the present moment in various ways.
And the social pressure is enormous.
So, now with that, I do want to make a comment. I wasn't going to at first, but then I want to get back to something that this takes us again back into critical theory. And like I said before, it asks the basic question of who holds power and how do institutions preserve it. Now, the thing about critical theory, It examines schools, it examines religions, families, media, corporations, governments, and traditions. And that's exactly what you guys are talking about. And nothing is exempt from criticism. Okay, now, for people who support critical theory, they say that this is healthy and everything or every institution should be questioned. Whereas critics who are against critical theory, they say that this becomes a problem with criticism only because the criticism, it only flows one direction. Okay. Now, the thing about when it comes to the critics is critics of critical theory argue that eventually everything traditional becomes suspicious. That includes religion. They call religion a power structure. They call family a power structure. National identity, it's a power structure. Language, power structure. History, a power structure. Critics usually fear that when every institution is viewed through the lenses of oppression, society stops asking what is true and they begin to ask who is winning. So that's the one thing that I did want to point out when it comes to what you guys are discussing.
I'm just thinking on the point of anybody who disagrees with the postmodern sort of or the these sort of anybody can be anything, and everybody's equal, or
Identical.
in all concepts, identical even. I've just lost my chain of thought again. Anybody who disagrees with that, and we hear it all the time, anybody who disagrees with these concepts are considered to use a colloquialism, the so-called far right, the old extremists, where traditionalism is now considered as an extremist value. And anybody who have traditional sort of values, so may that be religious values or sort of the 2.4 family sort of concept, are now considered to be extremists. It also relates to, like I said before, about power grab, where you've got, and this goes back to socialism, in fact, where the state is the representation of everything. The state is the representation of the family. The state is the representation of religion, of there is no such thing as a God anymore, because God is now the state. There's no such thing as a traditional family now, because the family is the state, or the state is the family. So fundamentally, it's like I said before, it's a power grab where the authority figures become the entity you must worship. The state, the power figure may be a government or maybe a company. I mean, we've all heard of join this company and become part of the family sort of concepts. And we've also heard, to go back to a much more older idea, the concept of the mafia, the being the family. So it's a top-down authority figure where whoever is in charge becomes the patriarch, becomes the family sort of head, and destroys. And this also raises the question of the destruction of individualism, because everybody now must be grouped into, must be boxed into certain groups, and must be prescribed by the authority to be part of a group rather than an individual.
Now, at this point, I think it would be best to ask Otto how he would like to respond to what you've just said.
Well, I was reminded of Benito Mussolini, the guy that created fascism, who said, "All within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state." And which is basically what Mark was describing. The state becomes all. And of course, Friedrich Nietzsche also warned us about this. He talked about the new tyrant, the new idol, which was the state. And it was like a dragon, and each scale was a law. You know, you will do this, you will do that, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that. And it points back to what I was saying about the revaluation of values, the turning of names, that making things that are normal for humans into suddenly something to be ashamed of, something to be feared, something that someone is ostracized over, like having a family, or having a male head of a household providing the financial resources, and the female member of the household raising the children. Something like that is seen. It was seen. There was this whole movement to make that seem like the most abject slavery, that a woman would raise her own children. To truly be liberated, she had to go and slave away for corporate America as well. And to be really liberated, she shouldn't get married at all, or even if she does get married, she shouldn't have any children. And all of this was very strange and abnormal. But now, if you try to say this again, you're considered far right. They call you this, they call you that. You know, there's that famous cartoon of the guy that was slightly left of center, but then they changed the left so far that suddenly he's considered to be a fascist. You know, I talked about one of the reasons I voted for Ralph Nader. Yes, I was a Ralph Nader supporter. I actually went and saw him speak live, and many of his platform planks included closing the southern border, protecting American industry with tariffs, expelling illegal aliens. He used to work with Cesar Chavez. You may have heard of him. He was a very famous labor organizer, very left-wing here in the United States. And he and his followers used to attack and beat illegal workers with barbed wire whips because they were taking the jobs away from the legal immigrants. And this was seen as dangerous. This is Ralph Nader. This is about as left-wing as you can get. So then we have a later politician who comes up and says, hey, let's close the southern border. Let's protect our industry with tariffs. Let's drive out the illegal aliens that are it's like a drug on the market. It's like an albatross around the neck of the country. And suddenly it's like, oh, no, that's wrong. It's morally wrong. You know, we have to destroy ourselves because after all, we deserve to be destroyed, so forth and so on. And it's part of this turning of names and trying to inculcate this new normalcy. And it works up to a point, and the people doing it are very loud, and they keep repeating it and pounding it into people through the airwaves. And the thing is, it doesn't work so well anymore. We saw that the amount of confusion on the part of these people in 2016, it was like they were practically saying, we told you that it was wrong to vote for this guy. We told you how to vote. Why didn't you vote the way you were told? And the fury that people were simply not paying attention to what the TV told them, but were instead actually doing their own research. I told you the story when this very modern, prominent politician, who we won't name, made a speech, and someone came to me and said, so and so just said that all Mexicans are rapists, and I'm like, really? That doesn't sound like something he would say, especially if you're running for office. And he's an intelligent guy, so I had to watch the speech. Didn't say that at all. Tried to point it out to the person, and they simply wouldn't hear it. Or he obviously meant to say these things that she felt that he should be saying in order to fit into that role of the evil one. So it's a very, very odd thing. But yeah, that was my comment. What Mark was talking about, basically, the turning of names, to trying to reclassify things in ways that don't make sense.
So, what's your response to that, Mark?
I can't really respond to that.
I just said I agree with Mark.
Yeah. You just reiterated
what Mark said, basically.
Yeah.
In common terms, that would be a rebuttal. You would be able to rebut the comment.
Well, I can't rebuttal him because he sort of reiterated what I stated. If I rebuttal him, I rebuttal myself.
You should have.
You could just say, "Well, I agree that Otto agrees with me."
You should have opportunity to do that. So now we turn this over to the wild man Robert. We will let him make his comments since he has come into the room. Robert, do you have a response to anything that you have just heard here?
Yeah. Like, okay, for a perfect example, like Citizen X. Okay. Look how that went. They did the thing of covering it up and all that because they didn't want people to find out that there's anything like that goes on. But you call it, like, if you want money, the control of any kind of situation that comes up, you don't want that you don't want that information to be leaked out. Okay. And Russia was doing that with that and other crimes against children. When you're into that, you're a sexual. You use that as a sexual predator's conquest. Because you're using that to cover up the fact that that's what you are. The people that will hide their true identity, true way they are, by doing that, covering it up and using that laws for whatever they so choose. And you can take movies, and say, well, you see this is what's going to be turning in if we don't do this and this and this. And people that feels in that way will follow that film, that the idea of what that guy's selling. That politician or anyone, they will follow it. You can lead someone by the nose, you just in a certain way that you phrase the certain things. You can lead people to doing whatever you want. Okay. Look at all the like the big one that where they had over 500 people commit suicide by drinking poison tea. I forget what, back in the 80s that happened. Okay.
Jim Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. They are able to use that kind of material like that for any way, form, or fashion like that to make people think in a certain way that they want them to think. Okay. Government knows this too. Government uses that just as well too. And they use all that information that they do collect up about people and how, okay, your medical history and all that. And they map it out. They do. Like, for if your family has that case of medic depressant runs bad in your family, and if they ever wanted to, if you gave them choices, they can use that against you in so many different ways. Like, they can make it look like you did something, commit a crime. and they can use that for an example why no one's going to take face value on what you're saying, that you didn't do it. Because who's going to believe a person that might have that problem, that medical problem? And where when you can use, you can go a wide variety of different uses of that information and all that. And you can tell when politicians are, because like they found out that here in the U.S., politicians were uh, going into the stock market using information that they wasn't supposed to be using, but they were financially broke, and they were using money they were to get into the stock market and to make billions of
I
funds.
mean, you're kind of like going off into
Oh, okay. Well,
into a
okay.
whole area that, like, now a lot of what you did say, it kind of brings up why I don't really feed in either the right or the left way of thinking, because they're all pretty screwed up. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the best way that I can actually say anything about that is talk when I discuss like things about like the fear of social engineering. Okay. Now this is another criticism. This leads to another kind of criticism, basically, where some people argue sociology, especially when combined with political activism, can become social engineering. Now, the concern with this is if experts know how values form, or how norms spread, or how social pressures work, and how institutions influence behaviors, then who decides which values societies should promote? Is there a danger in that? Governments, universities, corporations, media organizations, they begin shaping behavior intentionally. You know what I mean? And some people's answers are absolutely, while others answer that conspiracy theorists are the ones who are bringing this stuff up. So that's the best way I can answer a lot of what you're saying right there. You know what I mean? It's like every time you get on the internet, all right? Every time you get on the internet, your whole way of thinking is being shaped, and it's being shaped by the internet. It's being shaped by the media. It's being shaped by the government. It's all being shaped, and it's being done intentionally. And that's something that people need to realize. This stuff is being done intentionally. So that's something else that needs to be recognized as well. The better way of saying it is it's shaping your behaviors. You know what I'm saying? And that's the point that I'm bringing up. But then you'll find people too who they'll say who will say that studying society isn't controlling society. It's understanding peer pressure, or it's that. Like understanding peer pressure isn't like creating peer pressure, or studying religion isn't attacking religion. You know, studying power isn't seizing power. Just stuff like that. They argue sociology is a tool, and like any other tool, its effects depend on who's using it. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff that I'm really watchful for when I hear a lot of this stuff being said. So, but that's the one thing that I'll point out there.
Are you not going down the billboard sort of statement? Sociology is both. It can be used as a form of study. And it can also be used as a tool to push people into believing and doing stuff. I found it interesting that you just mentioned the internet. I would actually go further and say it happens throughout society, Western society as a society as a whole. People read newspapers, people watch TV, watch films, watch people go to work, act in certain ways when they go to a supermarket, and a lot of this is being a lot of these concepts are being enforced upon people. I'm not sure how to easily put this. The idea that let's not just pinpoint internet usage as the only sort of mechanism of how sociology is being used as a tool. I mean, it happens. The tool is being used in everyday society, irrelevant if you're using the internet or doing other things.
Well, let me also point out, well, first of all, I wasn't going to make a comment on this until I was listening to what Robert had to say, and that's when I wanted to say what I had to say. But I also want to point out the fact that, first of all, I don't feel that sociology is a tool. I think that sociology is probably the most dangerous creation or invention that was ever created by humans since the beginning of society. I think that it's a very, very dangerous threat, and it could potentially be the ending or be our end. It's very dangerous. So that's one thing I do want to point out. You know what I mean? Now you can call it a tool if you want, but I will call it a very, very dangerous weapon.
I think this idea we have of a science that is somehow objective, the scientist is this godlike being writing his papers in the third person. The subject was done this, the subject that we did this, the subject, and then the subject was sacrificed. That's the term they use when they do animal experimenting, by the way, when they get sacrificed. So it's the altar of science. It's very, very pagan. These guys, though, when they created something, they didn't create it for an objective, like, let's just study society. I mean, I think arguably the first, I go back to Plato again. The ancients were very, very good at social engineering. This was not a weird idea for them. The idea of being able to redesign society from the top down was the reason why they tried to study society and figure out how to do this. They had a goal, which was to make these changes. Plato had a goal. I want the perfect society. How can we do this? And he describes in the Republic, first you take everybody over the age of 9, I believe, and you kill them. So you just start off with a bunch of, already we're starting off with a bloody atrocity with Plato. This is Plato, though. And but I mean, he had a very, and it wasn't just him. A lot of people wrote republics. There was Plato's Republic, Cicero wrote a republic. Just the idea that you could manipulate a society to make it whatever you want. And of course, Russell Gmirkin, to bring him up, wrote the wonderful book, and what was it called? Brosis and Menethau, where he talks about how he feels that what we consider to be modern Judaism was a very consciously crafted effort at social engineering to create a very strong, powerful, ethnocentric tribe of warriors. that would be very resilient in the face of living among strangers. You have special dietary concerns, special dress codes, other sumptuary codes with your hair, beard, and so forth. This is to keep you separate. You're not allowed to eat with certain groups of people, not allowed to worship with certain groups of people. This was pretty different from most religious traditions in the Levant and the Mediterranean basin at this time. And it seems to have drawn a lot on Greek ideas, Plato's laws, some ideas from the Republic. What's interesting is the Spartans, another group of socially engineered people, claimed kinship with the Hebrews. And the Hebrews at the time, this was like the classical period, agreed that, yeah, I mean, we've got so many laws that are similar, so many traditions that are similar. Nobody thought that maybe those guys that were writing up the Pentateuch at the Library of Alexandria under Ptolemy II were like, these Spartans are pretty good. How can we become a powerful, resilient warrior race? And I think they succeeded quite well. So yeah, sociology, as we would call it, I think it was developed for a specific purpose by people. They weren't just saying, let's study humans. They're like, how can we change humans? And this again, these top-down social organizations, Sparta is a great example of it in action. And with all of these theoretical, I guess, papers, you'd call them, that the philosophers were writing at the time. Excuse me.
So right now we come to the crazy part. This is where the wild man unmutes and tells everybody what he thinks. So with that being said, I am going to ask Robert to go ahead and unmute and tell everybody what your comment is concerning what you may have heard tonight or what your thoughts are. It doesn't have to relate to anything we said, even though it would probably be a good idea if it did. But I'm going to turn it over to you and let you make your comment, Robert. So here you go.
Okay. But what I was referring to is that by knowing the people that you're understanding and all that, where it's not so much a control, but to understand as well too, to where for whatever purpose or however you would want certain things to go, you gotta know them in the good and the bad of the mind, of the way they think and the way they handle certain situations. And where when in different groups do certain things different, and you more or less learn from each group on and you will learn better too on how would you handle the conversation from them, how will each one handles and difference of each of them. And when government, it's like with government and law enforcement and all that, they all follows the same thing about that too. They say they lead you up to a certain thing. They as I said, they can lie to you up to an extent, but how far, that's the problem when there's a lot of lying going on and not enough. It's hard to say where the truth is and the truth ain't in the process of it. And you can't, and when people everyone, but yeah, where when other groups comes into play, it is a dangerous thing.
So it sounds like you're beginning to run yourself in circles, Robert. So what we'll do is we will open it up, and first we'll open it up to Mark Edworthy and let him respond to what you had to say there, okay? So we'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Okay. You are making the argument that to put it down to its brass knuckles, sort of, so to speak. Social, this concept is the understanding how people work. It allows for the enforcement of certain ideas. Allows to just the understanding of something allows you to formulate a mechanism on how to enforce ideas onto people. One thing that strikes me when you were just talking, you made the point of groups, and you are making the argument that people, there is a group think. It's there. There is no such a thing as individuality. If you are a member of a group, then you must think like this, or you must act like that. And that argument ignores the concept of individualism, which again we're seeing so much at this present moment, because you are of a, let's say, a specific ethnic or sexual, religious, or whatever group. You must automatically think in the sort of stereotypical points that group is meant to think like.
Right.
All right. So with that being said, Robert, do you want to respond to anything Mark really just said? Unmute.
I wasn't referring to one group. I was saying groups of people. If with each group difference, okay, to understand for however you want things to go in the way you would want to, what better you'll learn from three different groups, their way of thinking, the way they do it, the way they handles other situations. Each group handles situations different. They think different than each group. If you put one group as, that one group of where you're thinking you're a woman and you're a man, okay? If you have one group there, one group, two other groups different, okay? All right. Now, each group has to handle things different to survive. And they have to think of it in that way.
When we get farther into the series, we'll be discussing that even deeper, because a lot of this has to do with compartmentalization.
Yes. I was going to say.
If you hold off until another later episode, Robert, we can get into it. But you have to be a part of the group, okay? Because you do bring up a valid argument, but that's for later. Go ahead.
I just want to just re-emphasize what I said. Again, you making so much. You said to yourself, how a group thinks, how a group reacts. So there is no such thing as individualism. If you are a member of a group, you must think like this.
Well, no, yeah, but within that group, how many of that same group do think of a slightly different way of the original, the ideal, whatever that ideal is? All 12 might have it, but they all might be three have a different view of, different way of that group, of whatever's going on.
Now, hold on a minute. Like I said, we can hold on to that later. Now, Otto, do you want to respond?
Well, my thought is, listening to this, I think we're all looking for something here. we all want our societies to work better. We want our governments to be people we can trust. We don't want people to be accused of crimes wrongfully, and Robert seems concerned about that. He's talked about that more than once, and there have been terrible incidents, and these things are true. But we're really looking, I think, for something we don't have right now when we're trying to thrash out what's going wrong. And I think we kind of know, talking about these boxes, compartmentalization, groups acting like groups, treating all blacks are like this and all whites are like this and all, whatever group you want to, come up with, all Presbyterians are like that and all Catholics are like this. This is, I think, an attempt. It was like socialism. We talked about socialism earlier. This idea that the society must be socialist. And this gets back to the archaic idea, and very archaic to us, that the powers of government, the power of society, the power of spiritual authority, church, religion, whatever, are all one thing. When Aristotle talks about good government, he's really talking about what we would say is a good society. They didn't really have much differentiation between these things. And I've talked about like the Elizabethan era, where the Queen Elizabeth I was head of the church, and she dictated what sermons, we're going to war with this country. So for weeks you'd hear about how evil the French are, which doesn't take much. Or you'd hear, this, that, or the other thing. But what gets me is, and I've said this before, there's no such thing. I mean, when you let just people live, they talk about capitalism versus socialism versus communism, and socialism is just kind of like communism light. We all live in a mix. Like I go to work. You've heard this spiel from me before, I'm sure, but our listeners may not have. I go to work. I sell my labor for money. That is capitalism in a nutshell. I come home. I share the money I've made with my wife, and so that's communism. We live collectively. We share, the same appliances. We live in the same building. So that's socialism, if you like. We're sharing. People share. People engage in the sale of their labor or whatever. They can, I can have a garage sale. Suddenly, I am one of the owners of the means of production and distribution. I'm producing things and selling them, perhaps. So we all are socialists. We're all capitalists. We're all authoritarians. We're all, I was talking about this whole idea of leadership, which is a big thing. We were talking about the Frankfurt School trying to deconstruct leadership. The question, who has the power? What's wrong with power? Everyone has power. There's always going to be power dynamics. And I've talked about like if I'm playing music with people, one person might take the lead and everyone will naturally do what he wants. He's like, listen to this song and start playing it. Or if we're trying to figure something else out, somebody else will step up and say, oh no, it's played this way. So it's very labile. I love that word. It fluctuates a lot, leadership in any group. One person might take charge about one thing. People will naturally listen to him or her. And in another situation, the leadership might shift somewhere else. And it's the same way with our economic relations. Sometimes we might be, in a haggling thing to get the best price possible. Other times we might just give stuff away. I give gifts to my friends all the time. They give me things. Where does that fit into the socialist economy? The socialists would want every gift registered, and you've got to make sure that we keep track of every financial transaction to make sure that there's no unfairness involved. Why did you give this guy a present worth $20 and this guy a present only worth $15? Doesn't matter that he would like that T-shirt better and this person really needs that pen set. It's this idea of, again, it comes back to fitting people into these categories and limiting them to that. Which you let other people do what they want, they'll do all kinds of interesting things, and you don't have to put a label on them.
I just want, just on a minor point, just on a very minor point, I noticed you used, you go to work and you share your money with your wife and you call that communism.
Yeah,
Communist. I think that might have been a slip of the tongue. Communism isn't really that. Communism is a much more wider concept of having socialism, having extreme socialism throughout multiple different states,
Well,
multiple
that
different
was the
countries.
last.
Oh
book.
yeah. It was a lot off the
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
That was the last
actual
book.
communism is. Yeah, it has to do with the control of the means of production and distribution, and the industrial bourgeoisie and all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, it was basically the last book that Karl Marx wrote. That's basically what it comes down to. Now, I do want to say that was actually a good thing that you brought up, Robert, and I do want to point out the fact that we are going to go further into that later on, because that does go into the whole area of compartmentalization, which is a part of what we will be discussing later on in these episodes. But I also want to say this before I bring this to an ending. Now, the real question to me is this. Maybe the debate isn't sociology versus socialism. Maybe the real question is, can any institution, even one dedicated to understanding humanity, remain politically neutral? Can universities? Can governments? Can media? Can churches? Can corporations? Or do all institutions eventually develop values they seek to protect? Because if institutions shape society and society shapes people, then perhaps the most important question is, who shapes the institutions? And perhaps an even more unsettling question, are we shaping society, or is society shaping us? That's the conversation, and it's one we're still having. Now, before we end the show, I would like to ask if you guys would be willing to give your socials so that people could find out how to reach you. So let's go around and see if we can do that real quick. Otto, how can people find you?
Well, if you want to know more about me and what I'm doing, check out my website, navakavada.org. That's NAVAKAVADA. It's spelled just like it sounds. I'm also on minds.com, username Otto_X, that's EX. And you can check out Navakavada on YouTube and Navakavada Buddhism on BitChute for some interesting and informative videos on Buddhism. And there's one on tobacco smoking too on the YouTube channel. I highly recommend it. There is one.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. So with that being said, how about you, Mark?
Okay. Mainly minds.com under the username Medworthy, or if you're lucky, down at the newest tobacconist.
I'll see you there.
Okay, so with me and Robert, you can find us at minds.com on my account, Roger_Hansen. You can also find us on X at Roger Hansen, Roger Hansen at ROGLOL1973. We are also on Element Matrix at Roger's Hangout. You can find us there as well. I'd like to thank everybody for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments down in the comment section. We will respond to every comment that is made as long as it's respectful and not trying to sell us views. With that being said, thank you for watching again, and I hope you have a good day, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of the day it is in your neck of the woods. And we will go ahead and end the stream. Talk to you later.